fortunate in a way to live in a time where there's so little trust in the British government. We're very fortunate, I suppose, that this is happening at a time where we know that the law has become a kind of weapon.
Look how sensitive and vulnerable he is. He must be gay.
That's right.
That means women feel safe around me. They trust me. Then bang, pregnant, bang, pregnant, bang, pregnant. What do you think that gesture means, the way you're touching that bottle? What does that indicate? What is that? What's the subtext of that? Are you in a bra designed by you now?
No, but I'm wearing my knickers.
Get him off. Come on! Everyone does it. Don't be afraid of your own sexuality. Do be a bit afraid of mine, though.
But when I was young and single, before I had my wife and family, we're just out of shot over there, my beautiful children, I was a fool, man.
All right, Liz, goodbye.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, it's been really a one-two six. How can I do your bra? Just like this.
I was a fool before I lived in the light of the Lord. I was a drug addict, a sex addict, and an imbecile. But what I never was a...
Well, it looks like Russell Brand, who has already gone through several rebrands, is gonna have to do another rebrand. For a really long time, he has been lionized as an irreverent truth teller, a comedic anarchist and countercultural voice. But beneath the facade of flamboyant eloquence lies a darker, far more troubling persona. Brand's career has thrived not despite, but because of a persona built on transgression. Aggression cloaked as comedy, cruelty excused as charisma, and manipulation disguised as vulnerability. For years, he has leveraged public confessions to preempt accountability and wielded his fame to insulate himself from criticism. And if you do happen to criticism, well, he's gonna have something to say about that. So this is not a story of redemption. It's a story of how institutions, audiences, and even the media have enabled a man whose harmful behavior, particularly towards women, was hiding in plain sight. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Sit back, relax, and take a deep breath. It's time to let the fresh air in. Hello everyone, welcome back or welcome if you're new. My name is Erin and I am fascinated by all things cult, true crime, and unique spiritual practices. I also like to call out spiritual influencers, and I think we all saw Russell Brand go through the failed comedian, failed actor to spiritual influencer pipeline, and then suddenly he became like an almost alt-right, but possibly even could be defined as alt-right voice on the internet. And it has just been way too long that he's been getting away with problematic rhetoric and even more disgusting behavior. So we're gonna jump right in, okay? Let's boogie, let's do it. More allegations are coming out, so by the time this video is uploaded, there's some other bomb that drops in this story. I will try to update y'all. Also, we are going to be talking about SA and other allegations that involve abuse towards particularly women. So if this is something you just cannot handle right now, totally fine to skip. A lot of my videos have trigger warnings like this. So I feel like if you're here, you're probably ready to hear some traumatizing details about certain stories. But if you're not there today, totally understand. So let's go. Let's learn a little bit about Russell Brand before he came to the spotlight, because he had a real journey from troubled youth to this international celebrity and self-styled revolutionary. And this is not just about his own personal reinvention. It is a case study in the cultural costs of unchecked charisma. So he was born on June 4th, 1975, and as a Gemini myself, we do not claim him. And he was born in Brand was raised in a working class household by his mother, Barbara, after his parents separated when he was just 6 years old. As someone who was also raised by a single mother, we don't claim him either. Now, his mother Barbara's frequent hospitalizations due to cancer meant that Russell was often left in the care of others, creating this profound sense of abandonment that could potentially mark his early psychology. In later years, Brand would claim that he was essayed by a tutor at age 7 and developed during adolescence, which is very rare in young boys, but often symptomatic of deep emotional dislocation. By the age of 16, Brand had already experimented with. He entered the Italia Conti Academy of Theater Arts, but was expelled after a year due to substance abuse and other disciplinary issues. He then later attended the Drama Centre London, only to be removed once again for his erratic behavior. Classmates describe him being disruptive, narcissistic, and inappropriately. Even then, he seemed to understand that chaos drew attention, and that attention could be weaponized. By his early 20s, Brand was living in squats, performing stand up in dive bars, and fueling an intense heroin addiction. His behavior was reckless and dangerous, but it also became this performance in and of itself. In interviews and memoirs, he has often romanticized this period, casting himself as a Byronic anti-hero. But beneath this theatricality lay some deeply rooted patterns of manipulation, instability, and deflection. Brand's ascent in the London comedy circuit came not through refinement of craft, but through sheer audacity. And as someone who studied extensively in Chicago and did comedy for 6 years straight, I was a Second City girly. I was like, I'm going to be on SNL one day. Sometimes you need a little audacity to get through, and a lot of people need a lot of substances to keep up with the demands of the lifestyle. Because I'm talking you work a 9 to 5 and you are at a rehearsal or a show every single night of the week. Every single Wednesday would start at either 10 or 11 p.m. So it's definitely a lifestyle that takes some audacity. But we don't need to weaponize that, right? We don't need to also offend or other women, do we? No. We don't. Now, Brand's early shows, particularly his 2001 Edinburgh Fringe production called Better Now, recounted his recovery from addiction in a very poetic and often disturbing detail. He spoke openly about drug binges, psychiatric holds, and escapades. Critics noted that while the show was raw, it also seemed performatively self-indulgent, which, I don't know, really just sounds on brand for Russell Brand. But what truly set him apart was his fusion of eloquence, but also vulgarity. He wielded ornate language as a smokescreen, masking his cruelty with his cleverness. His routines frequently included graphic tales of conquests, often involving women whose identities were thinly veiled. In one notorious bit, he joked about having with a woman while she cried, claiming that her tears acted as the lubricant. And the audience laughed. And that became a recurring pattern. Pain transformed into a punchline. He often bragged about the volume of women he slept with, the methods he used to manipulate them into bed, and his lack of emotional connection. Rather than challenging these attitudes, the media instead celebrated them. Brand was profiled in The Guardian, The Independent, and even Rolling Stone as a thinking woman's symbol. A paradoxical title for someone whose public act demeaned women at every turn. Brand's first major TV job came in 2000 as a VJ for MTV UK. But in 2001, he was fired for showing up to work dressed as the day after 9/11. Oh, and he brought his to the office. Now, this alone should have been a career-ending moment, but instead it just became part of his legend. producers across networks seemed eager to ignore red flags. Channel 4 soon gave him a late-night talk show, and in 2004, he was hired to host Big Brother's Big Mouth, where his on-screen energy became a massive selling point. Behind the scenes, however, production staff reportedly dealt with an increasingly erratic and aggressive man whose behavior was only tolerated because of good ratings. Because who needs integrity or safety in the workplace if the ratings are good? In 2006, the BBC gave Brand a radio show on Radio 2. He frequently made prank calls, used vulgar language, and discussed his escapades live on air. The turning point came in 2008 with Sasha's Gate, in which Brand and co-host Jonathan Ross left crude voicemails for actor Andrew Sachs describing Brand's relationship with Sachs' granddaughter, Georgina Bailey. Wow, sounds like great content. Over 40,000 complaints were filed. And Bailey, humiliated, later said that she suffered anxiety and long-term emotional damage due to this stunt. Brand resigned, but not before reframing the scandal as a media overreaction. Many British commentators played along, reducing the incident to, it was just a PR misstep. Nobody worry, we don't care if you're offended. All you... Sorry, I'll stop now. Let's get back to the story. Maybe this is why I didn't have a comedy career. I digress. It seemed that few asked why a national broadcaster had allowed such behavior to go unchecked for so long. Now, my fellow Americans will probably recognize him as really only from this and maybe one other movie. But in 2008, Brand was cast in Forgetting Sarah Marshall as Aldous Snow, a hedonistic rock star whose traits, oh shocker, seemed to mirror Brand's own traits. And this film was a hit, and I can confirm I love this movie. I will still watch it if I need a good laugh. And Hollywood quickly just seized on his image. And then he reprised the same role in Get Him to the Greek, and he starred in Arthur in 2011 and also voiced Dr. Nefario in Despicable Me. But this man's press tours were chaotic. He made lewd comments to interviewers, hosts, and interrupted programs. During a 2011 appearance on MSNBC's Morning Joe, he mocked the host's intelligence, flirted aggressively with the women, and eventually commandeered the show entirely. The clip went viral as comedy, not as evidence of professional misconduct. Like, why was he not embarrassed? At the 2008 VMAs, Brand ridiculed the Jonas Brothers for wearing purity rings, targeting teenage boys over their religious beliefs. Though the incident drew criticism, MTV invited him back the following year. Nobody really seemed to care. And what I find really interesting about Brand's brand at the time is if you've made a career talking about how you're sober and you're no longer a hoodlum maniac, why are you judging other people for the promises they're making to really themselves in their own lives? Doesn't really make sense to me. Wouldn't you be like, yay, good, don't be like me. I don't even know how many STDs I've had over the years. I do not know if he's had any STDs. That was just a joke, okay? Now, what did Hollywood think of all of this? Well, Hollywood and the media executives viewed these transgressions not as liabilities, no, but marketable chaos. Behind the scenes, however, a different narrative was brewing. According to later reports, multiple women alleged Brand used his fame to coerce them into unwanted situations. His wild man image allowed him to operate without scrutiny. Any complaint was dismissed as misreading his charm or mistaking his eccentricity for abuse. Right. Russell Brand would end up having a very high-profile relationship with pop star Katy Perry, and this began as a storybook romance, but it ended in a way that left Katy Perry emotionally devastated. Now, the pair met in 2008 at the MTV Video Music Awards, and they quickly fell for one another. In October 2010, they married in a lavish ceremony in India, with Brand arriving on an elephant. a fittingly grand symbol for a union that had captured intense media attention. Yet behind the public glamour, their marriage was plagued by mismatched expectations, and Perry would later describe her experience with him as emotional manipulation. Now, Katy Perry at the time was at the peak of her career. I mean, she was amazing, and she still is amazing. I loved her. I was obsessed with her. Her song about cherry chapstick and kissing girls, I mean, I loved that song. It was fantastic. It was like, I'm going to date myself, but it was just like the theme song of my college career. Not that I was running around kissing girls, but I definitely love my chapstick. But anyways, she's at the peak of her career in the middle of their marriage. She's touring the world as a chart-topping artist, and initially, brands seemed to admire her strength and success. She said that at first when I met him, he wanted an equal. However, as time went on, brands' attitude shifted dramatically. Haven't we heard this story before? Oh, in almost every tale you hear about a woman being more successful in the entertainment industry than her partner. Yeah. Now, according to Perry, he grew uncomfortable with her success and autonomy to the point of being very controlling of her, especially when she was on tour. He allegedly couldn't handle the equalness of their partnership and resented the, quote, atmosphere of me being the boss on tour, as Katy Perry. And apparently resented this atmosphere of Katy being the boss on tour. And this is according to Katy Perry. I think she has every right to be the boss of her own world tour, but maybe that's just me, a meek, young woman. Not so young, but you get it. So these remarks were made in a 2013 Vogue interview, and they reveal how Brand's need for dominance really strained the relationship and hurt Perry deeply. He was like the first alpha male, if alpha males were greasy and like Temu versions of Captain Jack Sparrow. Oh my God, maybe I'll rise to comedy glory if I just keep insulting Russell Brand. But what had started as this passionate romance would devolve into a dynamic where Perry felt totally undermined, almost guilty for having success, which she worked really hard for. And this left her feeling really upset and super controlled. Now, one particularly telling incident occurred when Perry attempted to surprise her husband at one of his comedy shows. She later learned that Brand had been making jokes at her expense on stage, not realizing that she was in the audience. Perry described feeling humiliated, that what she once found hysterical in Brand's humor turned hurtful when she became the butt of his jokes. This moment hinted at a lack of respect and empathy on Brand's part, reinforcing this imbalance in their marriage. The end of their marriage was as shocking as it was abrupt. In December 2011, just 11 months after their wedding, Brand ended the relationship by sending Katy Perry a text message announcing that he was divorcing her. And this can be seen in her documentary, and she is literally right about to go on stage to perform. Someone literally is like, you can cancel the show or you can fight through your pain. And she decided to fight through her pain. And it's just like, you can see the pain in her eyes, her body language. You can tell she's just in so much pain about it. And this cold, sudden dismissal, if not to make it worse right before one of her shows, was delivered on New Year's Eve. And it left her utterly reeling. She would later say that she hadn't even heard from him since he texted her saying he wanted a divorce. The fact that Brand broke up with his wife via a brief text and then just ghosted her was widely reported and critiqued in the media as a cruel act, because it was. Wow, finally, we're not pretending this guy is just, oh, he's just such a goofball. He's so silly. Yeah, he's kind of a, but like, just let him be. He's hot and funny and he has an accent, so let him get away with whatever he wants. And Perry would later hint that Brand wielded their relationship as something that he could just casually discard once it no longer served him. Or what it sounds like when he could no longer feel like he was man enough living under Perry's shadow. In interviews following the divorce, Perry grappled with feelings of guilt and betrayal. She said she felt a lot of responsibility for it ending. But then she found out the real truth, which she wouldn't disclose because she said she kept it locked in her safe for a rainy day. Pretty cryptic words that she spoke in 2013, and they suggest that Perry discovered something about Brand, maybe a very serious transgression, that ended up shifting her perspective on him. Now, media coverage of their split was intense and very voyeuristic. The tabloid press played up the contrast between Brand's brash bad boy persona and Katy Perry's candy-colored pop princess image. In the immediate aftermath, headlines speculated about what went wrong. Was Brand intimidated by Perry's success? Did he relapse into old promiscuous bad habits? The narrative of him being unable to handle the equalness of a powerful woman became the focal point. Perry herself confirmed that it was very controlling, which was upsetting. And this was a statement that the media widely reported as a glimpse into Brand's manipulative side. Meanwhile, Brand largely stayed quiet publicly about the specifics, aside from occasional flippant remarks in some of his stand up routines. And this allowed him, for a time, to avoid any real serious scrutiny. In 2013, when asked about the marriage on stage, Brand acknowledged Perry as being an amazing person, but referred to that period of his life as chaotic and himself as a little disconnected, which is a very vague self justification that totally glossed over his role in causing that chaos. Looking back, we kind of realize that this short lived marriage kind of stands as this cautionary tale about how a very charismatic and bubbly couple can actually have a secret life where the man is exercising subtle cruelty and control behind closed doors. Perry's brave admissions about feeling controlled and hurt, combined with the cold manner of the divorce, paint Brand as a partner who sought to dominate, and when challenged, he just abandoned. The media spectacle of their breakup, from the infamous text message to Perry's tearful resilience on film, not only humanized Perry in the public eye, but also seemed to foreshadow patterns of behavior and abuse allegations that would emerge about Brand in later years. For Perry, reclaiming her narrative meant recognizing that Russell Brand's failings were his own. As she poignantly once stated, once she learned the truth, she accepted that this is not because of me, so she's moved on from that. It was a hard-won realization that signaled the end of an emotional ordeal, one where the pop superstar had been just as much of a victim of Brand's ego and insecurity as any adoring fan he ever charmed on stage. After his Hollywood and comedy peak and rapid decline, Russell Brand reinvented himself in the early to mid 2010s as a self-styled political activist and social critic, shedding, at least outwardly, the skin of this body Lothario. He now spoke the language of the revolution, inequality, and, of course, spiritual awakening. Central to his rebranding was a flurry of high-profile interviews, a best-selling book, and an online platform, all of which blurred the line between genuine activism and self-promotion. Brand's leap into politics and social commentary earned him both praise and sharp criticism for its contradictions. And let me tell you, there were many. One watershed moment in Brand's activist turn was his October 2013 appearance on BBC's Newsnight with Jeremy Paxman. In that infamous interview, Brand passionately denounced the political status quo and urged people not to vote, calling for a revolution of the system. He confessed that he had never voted in his life out of disdain for a rigged system, and spoke about wealth inequality and environmental crisis with evangelical fervor. Yeah, it's really, really easy for a rich white man to feel like he doesn't have to vote because the system is rigged anyways. Yeah, okay. Tell that to every marginalized group that's seeing the repercussions of other people's votes. Now, this performance on BBC electrified many young fans who had been disillusioned with establishment politics. And suddenly, the prankster who once made headlines for obscene jokes was being hailed as the voice of the discontented masses. Give me a break. And luckily, other skeptics noted a very deep irony. As one reviewer quipped, Brand was in some ways the voice of the discontented wealthy. Here was a man made rich and famous by the very system he condemned, now positioning himself as a spokesman for the downtrodden. Brand would double down on his new persona by guest editing an issue of The New Statesman and authoring a 2014 book plainly titled Revolution. The book expanded on his critiques of capitalism, media, and government, mixing somewhat insightful observations with comedic digressions and spiritual musings. It became a bestseller, but not without attracting derision. Traditional political commentators and fellow comedians alike accused Brand of hypocrisy and also naivete. In The Observer, columnist Nick Cohen disparaged Brand as the voice of the discontented wealthy, suggesting that his privileged status undercut his credibility as a revolutionary. Others pointed out how Brand's calls for radical change sat uneasily alongside his indulgences. He preached against consumerism while enjoying a celebrity lifestyle, and lambasted corporate greed while remaining very much a beneficiary of the entertainment corporate machine. Critics also noted that Brand's revolution was heavy on the theatrics and light on concrete solutions. His proposals were very vague and were kind of tended towards a utopia of sorts. For instance, Brand advocated for vaguely spiritual collectivist principles and urged people to find meaning beyond materialism, which, while heartfelt, left many unconvinced that he had a real roadmap for real change. Meanwhile, media outlets feasted on the spectacle of a former addicted comedian opinioning on wealth distribution. But some coverage was positive, crediting Brand for galvanizing apathetic young people to discuss politics. Other coverage was scathing. The Telegraph called out the hypocrisy of Brand, arguing that his true addiction was not or fame, but power, the power of influence and ego. They pointed out that he's climbed the Hollywood ladder while railing against the capitalist elite. All he is after is whatever serves his ego and his wallet. Such critiques suggested that Brand's activism was less about the public good and more about maintaining his own relevance. Yeah, sounds about right. One platform where Brand's activist voice truly flourished was, you guessed it, on YouTube, with the launch of his channel and web series, The Trues, a portmanteau of true news. Starting in 2014, Brand released hundreds of episodes of The Trues, offering his hot takes on current events, media bias, and global affairs. The show, delivered in Brand's manic, verbose style, gained a substantial following. And in these videos, Brand styled himself as a truth teller, fighting a deceitful establishment, peppering genuine critiques of corporate media with jokey asides. Topics ranged widely from UK austerity policies and climate change to celebrity gossip used as distractions. Brand often hit valid points about inequality and propaganda, but then he also veered into simplistic populism. His commentary could be sweeping and lacking nuance, reflecting his outsider's mix of insight and misunderstanding. But nevertheless, to an audience frustrated with polished politicians and journalists, Brand's raw, unfiltered monologues felt kind of fresh and inspiring. Yet, even as he played the role of social critic, Brand could not escape charges of self-interest. Contradictions abounded. He famously urged people not to vote, arguing that voting only legitimized a broken system, but then, plot twist, just days before the 2015 UK general election, he endorsed the Labour Party. After an extensive on-camera interview with Labour leader Ed Miliband, Brand appealed to fans that perhaps they should vote after all, if they voted for Miliband, seemingly recognizing that pure abstentionism might not bring change. This U-turn was mocked by many as evidence that Brand's political stance was scattershot and self-serving. It appeared that he enjoyed the influence of telling millions not to vote until he was faced with the real-world consequences and a desire to be taken seriously by the left establishment. Similarly, while decreeing wealth equality, Brand never quite renounced his own comforts. He purchased a home, invested in projects, and even at one point was called out for a not very socialist act of evicting tenants from a property that he owned, a report that he denied, but which tabloids eagerly splashed across pages as proof of hypocrisy. Brand bristled at these critiques. At one point, he threatened to sue The Sun for labeling him a hypocrite over his luxury living arrangements, insisting that owning a nice home did not negate his message. And I'm sorry, if your net worth is in the multi-millions, I don't really know if you can, talk or speak for the middle class. But they say that leap from middle class to upper class is like getting broader. So maybe if your net worth is a million, you could still be considered middle class, especially with how the economy is going. But I digress. Now, over time, Brand's activist image took another turn, morphing into something of a wellness guru and conspiracy skeptic, especially during the C-19 pandemic. By the late 2010s, after a period of semi-retirement from the spotlight, he reemerged online in a mix of yoga and meditation-infused spirituality and anti-establishment commentary. He'd become an advocate for recovering addicts, drawing from his own journey of sobriety, and spoke about mindfulness and personal awakening. This could have been a benign evolution, but as global turmoil hit in 2020, Brand's content drifted into more troubling territory. He started questioning mainstream narratives on public health and geopolitics in a way that aligned with more conspiratorial thinking. For example, during the pandemic, Brand repeatedly suggested that governments and the pharmaceutical industry were colluding to exaggerate the C-19 crisis for profit and control. In one video, he cynically asked, if the response to the pandemic was about saving lives, why did nothing happen until it affected the stock market? Which, yeah, one might ask why. But doesn't that speak more to a system being broken? And it was these leading questions that implied a sinister motive without outright stating any falsehood became a hallmark of his videos. Brand's YouTube channel saw a sharp spike in popularity as he tapped into the vein of mistrust. The longer the pandemic went on, the more his views hardened. He rallied against vaccine mandates, floated the idea that mainstream media was hiding the truth, and courted an audience that distrusted experts. By 2021/2022, Brand was fully ensconced in the world of online free thinkers, even as it overlapped with far-right and anti-science communities. He would host guests like Jordan Peterson, ew, or praise figures like Tucker Carlson, ew, claiming that even the former Fox News anchor had become an anti-establishment figure now, in the same space as we do in independent media. Brand's content increasingly featured topics like the Great Reset, alleged media cover-ups, the war in Ukraine, even casting Ukraine's president as a pawn of Western interests, and other hot-button conspiracy-laced themes. He took to calling his viewers awakening wonders, positioning himself as a leader guiding people to hidden truths. Yet, careful to avoid outright misinformation charges, Brand's videos often stopped short of stating false claims unequivocally. Instead, he would pose just asking questions style monologues. This strategy allowed him to speculate wildly about conspiracies while retaining plausible deniability. Critics observed that Brand's approach, casting doubt, hinting at cover-ups, but rarely ever stating facts that could actually be debunked, was kind of a savvy way to build a large following among the disenchanted without getting banned from platforms for spreading blatant falsehoods. However, even that careful line didn't fully protect him. In September 2022, YouTube actually took action against Brand for C19 misinformation, removing one of his videos for violating their policies. Brand responded with characteristic defiance. He accused YouTube of censorship and promptly announced a move to Rumble, an alternative video platform that promises more free speech with minimal content moderation. On his main YouTube channel, that has over 6 million subscribers, by the way, Brand began posting only short previews, urging fans to follow him over to Rumble for the full-length episodes. He said, "Being on YouTube, we have to be cautious in what we say," he told his audience. He painted himself as a truth teller hounded by big tech. This narrative of Russell Brand versus the censors only further fueled his self-image as a martyr of free speech. In reality, the content he was spreading often did flirt with misinformation, such as questioning vaccine efficacy or claiming the pandemic response was just a smokescreen for government control. By portraying enforcement of misinformation rules as an attack on truth, Brand conveniently cast himself as both victim and hero, and this only strengthened his fan loyalty. And while we're on this topic, I just want to make one thing very clear as someone in the content creator space. YouTube makes its money from ad revenues. Obviously, the ads you see on YouTube, they pay YouTube. But these companies, since they're paying YouTube, they also can kind of dictate what kind of content they want their ad to be on. So if you are sharing really inflammatory, or even with true crime in this niche, we do have to be careful because a lot of brands don't want to be associated with murder, with conspiracy theories, with misinformation. So it's not big bad YouTube, big bad TikTok, big bad fill in the blank social media trying to shut you up. What they're actually doing is trying to make the most money because the more people, the more demographics that they can touch, and the more ads they can get on their platform, the more money they will make. So if you're spouting nonsense and saying curse words and doing all of this inflammatory stuff, then ads aren't going to want to be on your channel. There are ways that the algorithm can detect. Whenever I post a video on YouTube, I have to click buttons to confirm that I haven't said anything false or inflammatory or invoked bullying or talk about anything that would be dangerous for someone under 18 to see. And they do long checks on your videos that can take hours to ensure that the way you're rating your own video is correct. And if it's not correct, you will get a dock. Like, you will get flagged. That video will not get the same monetization because they will say, "Oh, wow, you were spreading a lot of misinformation. Oh, wow, you were talking about essaying and R-wording and all of these dangerous things that could be triggering for people." Brands don't want to be affiliated with those things. So we're going to demonetize your video, and you are not going to make much revenue because we are not going to put ads on your video because those brands don't want to be associated with your kind of content. It's not because they don't want you to spread certain messages and there's a conspiracy. It's these brands, all these brands that pay us millions and billions of dollars every year, don't want to be associated with this type of content. So they won't pay YouTube to put their brand alongside this kind of content. It's like the White Lotus thing that's going on right now, where one of the main characters who keeps having these unaliving ideations and ideations of murdering his family is wearing a Duke sweater, and Duke is like, "Hey, don't represent our brand in that way." That's the same thing happening in YouTube. That's it. It's not YouTube "Ooh, I'm going to shut you up." They don't care. They do not care. They just want money. They just want money from ad revenue. That is it. So speaking of money, guess what Russell Brand is really motivated by? Obviously, money. He constantly reminded viewers to subscribe for $60 a year to gain exclusive content, and his videos were peppered with ads, sometimes voiced by Brand himself, for wellness products and survivalist-esque gear. He established the Stay Free Foundation, ostensibly to support people recovering from addiction, which is a cause that reflects his genuine passion, but even that came under scrutiny. One charity partner cut ties with him in 2023, and until recently, the foundation hadn't filed any public accounts. So this raised questions about how funds were actually being used. To detractors, this was further evidence of the performative aspect of Brand's activism. He spoke of higher ideals and helping others, but much of his enterprise was built primarily on enriching Brand and enhancing Brand's influence so he could make more money. So to sum up this activist rebranding, we find a tangle of idealism and ego. On one hand, Brand did voice genuine concerns that were shared by many about economic injustice, political apathy, media corruption, and the search for meaning in a materialist world. He often articulated what mainstream figures wouldn't, and in doing so, brought up important discussions to audiences that might otherwise not engage with them. But on the other hand, his constant shape-shifting and contradictions suggest that Brand's primary project has always been Russell Brand. As the Telegraph incisively observed, all he's after is whatever serves his ego and his wallet. From revolutionary firebrand to wellness sage to anti-establishment YouTuber cozying up to reactionaries, Brand's positions shifted as they aligned with new opportunities for attention. The through line here is that Russell Brand's insistence that he alone is speaking truth to power, whether that power is the UK Parliament, the globalist elite, big pharma, or big tech, it is a narrative that casts him alternately as a prophet and an underdog. And it has indeed been self-serving. His 2014 promise of revolution has arguably devolved into something more like a personal media empire built on sensationalism and skepticism. For a man who once said the revolution cannot be boring, he has certainly kept things interesting. But, as events would soon reveal, all the impassioned monologues in the world could not wash away the consequences of his past behavior. Consequences that were about to catch up with him in devastating fashion. And in my next video, we are going to break down all of it. I'll go through all of the allegations, the pushback, all of the excuses that he's come up with, and I'll share in glaring detail some of the more disturbing aspects of the allegations. So stay tuned for that episode. It will be the next video up on my channel. I will be releasing it very, very soon, so please stay tuned. Thank you all so much for being here today. Please let me know what you think about this video. I really was a fan of Russell Brand, even when he was in his earlier YouTube days, back closer to 2014. I did he was vegan and said things that I thought were kind of cool. And then just watching him devolve has been just utterly shocking. So I would love to hear more about what you guys thought of him. Did you always get a weird vibe from him? When I kind of discovered that his character in Forgetting Sarah Marshall was basically him, I was kind of like, ew. It's fun if it's a character and it's pretend, but it's gross if it's not. So I'm curious to see if you guys agree with me. So anyways, everybody, thank you so much again for joining me. Please stay safe out there and remember to use your voice. This has been a theme that I keep hearing about. I was listening to a podcast today from a woman, and she just kept talking about how she gets so much pushback in the world from sharing things on her podcast, and she's constantly but I have to share, I have to use my voice because there was a time where I didn't feel like I had a voice. There was a time where I felt like no one would believe me. No one would listen to me. So even if it's going to ruffle some feathers or the truth will come out and that will potentially devastate a community, I have to speak out. I have to share my truth. And I think that's beautiful. I think any person who has been put down by another person, manipulated, abused by another person, it's so inspiring to other people when you use your voice, even as devastating and challenging as it can feel for you in the moment. And maybe that could be a motivator for speaking up and using your own voice. You know that I'm an advocate for whistleblowers and people who speak out against certain communities and organizations that are harmful. And I'm really eager to hear what you think about this man. And I feel like more is going to come out. I didn't intend for this to be a 2-part video, but as I'm sitting here and I realize I'm not even halfway through my script, I'm like, are people going to watch a 2-hour-long video? But you let me know. Maybe you like really, really long content while you're doing your Sunday cleaning. Please let me know down below, and that'll let me know too that you finished this video. So it would be like, oh yeah, of course, I love long videos. Anyways, everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. Please stay safe out there, ask questions, and always stay skeptical. I'll see you in my next video soon.